All over this country, we are seeing former first responders jump headfirst into politics. And so, one of the best out there, our next guest, I really wanted to bring him on to tell you why he would spend all these years as a cop. Then he went into the fire service, and then he decided to jump into politics. What motivates someone to continue to serve in the way that my next guest has? We're going to find that out and so much more. Congressman Anthony D'Esposito, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it very much.
So I'm going to ask you what I ask every cop guest, and that is, why the heck did you become a cop?
Well, I grew up on Long Island, and in a small blue collar community, a lot of cops, a lot of firemen, and here on Long Island, it's almost like you choose between the FDNY and the NYPD, and if you're truly blessed, you get called to come out to Nassau or Suffolk County and be county cops. But at a pretty young age, I loved the work that law enforcement professionals do. I went to an all boys Catholic school and went to Hofstra University. I graduated. I took the LSAT. LSAT, was planning on going into law school. And then really just thought to myself that, I was in school for the last 8 years, and as well as growing up. And I just didn't know if I really had it in me to sit behind a desk anymore. So I had taken the NYPD test, and they had called, and I figured, let's give it a shot. There's so much opportunity in law enforcement agencies. I think it's especially the bigger ones like the NYPD. I mean, I tell people all the time, especially kids, when I go speak in classrooms, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, you want to be an accountant, you want to be a vet, you can be all of those things, and you can still be a law enforcement professional, because there's so much opportunity within these agencies. So I joined the ranks of the NYPD, and I got started my career in a place called Brownsville, Brooklyn. It's probably the most, probably top 5 most violent square miles in the country. Definitely one of the most violent in New York City. And here is this kid who, grew up in sort of somewhat of a sheltered life in a small village, where it's one of those places where you walk down the main street. And if you pick your nose, everybody knows that you're picking your nose. It's like a small village like that. So going to the NYPD, and I remember standing my first foot post on the corner of Rockaway Avenue and Livonia Avenue in Brownsville. And you quickly learn, and you realize that this is a very different world, and people live a very different way. And you learn that people are fighting to survive on the streets, and unfortunately, far too often they turn to violence in order to survive on those streets. And I had an exceptional career. I mean, I was a very active and proactive cop. I got promoted detective pretty early in my career, and focused a lot on taking illegal guns and illegal narcotics off the street and dismantling gangs. I worked in a team-based atmosphere for most of my career. So really with the same group of guys almost from the day I started to the day I left. And I think 2 or 3 of the years that we were together, we accounted for the most gun arrests in the city of New York. So we did a lot of great work. And brought a lot of new technology into the NYPD. I was the case detective in what was called Operation Tidal Wave, which was the first investigation in NYPD history where social media was used to really captivate most of the intelligence that was used when we put it into the grand jury. And after about an 18-month investigation, we were able to dismantle 2 warring gangs and lock up 43 individuals for conspiracy to commit murder. And it was really the first time in the NYPD where we were using Twitter and Facebook and then MySpace in order to really do surveillance. Instead of sitting on a corner in one of those surveillance vans and taking video, we were doing the surveillance right from our desks by being able to watch them on computers and electronic devices. So doing cases like that really I believe changed policing in this country. I mean, now, there are units in almost every major police department where their focus is to follow violent individuals on social media and to capture what they're doing on an everyday basis. So I loved being a member of law enforcement. It's one of those things where people always say, sometimes God gives you the gift to be really great at one thing in your life, and I think that that one thing was definitely being an investigator and part of the NYPD. And I truly believe that we need more law enforcement, more public servants in government and politics. I think far too often, we were talking before we got on the show, far too often people get into this business because I think that they think the public is supposed to serve them. But in reality, it's about serving the public, and going from law enforcement or public safety or being a first responder into the world of government and politics. And it gives you such a different mindset. It's not someone like growing up. Very often people say, oh, you want to go into politics, you should study political science or become a lawyer. And this just proves that it's not the case. And I think that with the work that we do and the people that we talk to and everything we learn, it really is the best preparation. And I hope my parents don't listen to this, but being in the police department is a far better education than what you get behind a desk, because you learn things that you can never learn anywhere else. And those things that you learn, the opportunities and the experiences are really what prepare you for government and politics. It gives you the ability to look at somebody in the eye and know that they're completely full of crap. It gives you the ability to compromise. It gives you the ability to understand that you're not always going to get what you want, but there's a way to work together to find common ground. And I think in the world of politics right now, that's really what the American people are looking for. They're looking for, as President Trump says very often, they just want common sense. And I think when you talk to most law enforcement professionals, that's what their careers are based off of. They're based off of common sense and going out there and doing good police work.
I'm so glad you said that, because I often say in interviews, because I have been a government employee since I was 17 years old and was a police dispatcher. And, nobody understands how government works and sometimes doesn't work like a law enforcement officer, because we don't just see the police department, but we see every other agency. We see the court system. We see elected officials, all of that. That is all a part of our world. And, most of us do it for decades and decades. So we understand how government works, what can be fixed, what needs to be fixed, and things like that. Now you, when you left law enforcement, you got involved in not just politics, but you spent some time in the fire service, right?
I did. So actually on Long Island, actually all of our fire protection is volunteer based. So from the city line out to the east end of Suffolk, both Nassau and Suffolk County, we are protected by the volunteer fire service. So at the age of 18, I joined the fire department here in my hometown of Island Park, and I was elected chief in 2009. And I served from 2009 to 16 as chief. I led my department as the incident commander, both in Hurricane or Tropical Storm Irene and a Hurricane Sandy, which my community of Island Park was probably one of, if not one of the hardest hit communities in New York, and probably the East Coast during Hurricane Sandy. Probably 99% of our buildings, our homes, our businesses were underwater. And I remember the morning after the storm had hit, and I was at the firehouse, and we had 7 feet of water just in our firehouse. We lost a few of our trucks, but most of our equipment. But we remained vigilant, and the next day we had work to do. And I remember coming downstairs from the second floor of the firehouse and seeing the destruction and the devastation, and seeing individuals that I've known my whole life. Walking down our main street with literally everything that they had left in their life, was in a basket on their head. And this isn't, we're a middle class to upper middle class community. So it was devastating. And now you're, almost 13 years later, we're still seeing, houses being raised and the mitigation efforts continuing. But the fire service and being chief, especially in a volunteer organization, I mean, it definitely teaches you how to deal with personalities, egos, and try to make everybody happy. So being in the fire service is great. It's a real family here on Long Island, and it's one that has no doubt helped me in my campaigns. When you have fire departments representing every community, it is sort of it's a built-in family that will go out there and really work hard for one of their own. So being part of the fire service, being able to serve your community, and still to this day, I mean, it's a big part of my life with probably some of my closest friends in my life were created through that volunteer fire service.
And I know if folks listening have not, listened to some of your talks, read some of your writings, you can see that no nonsense frame of mind combined with compassion. And obviously it's seeing, you see one thing as a cop, and especially you working in detectives and homicides and gun cases and this, that, but it's obvious with your time in the fire service and your time at natural disasters like Hurricane Sandy, that you're able to combine that kind of cop mindset with that incredible compassion for how someone's life just changes in an instant, just like we're seeing with the fires in LA and the hurricanes in the Carolinas. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, and I also think, going to Congress, one of the people always ask me, what was one of the biggest surprises when you went to the House of Representatives? And I always say that, here on Long Island, and I would think, similar to Arizona and elsewhere, Republicans for the most part, stick together. They handle their business as a family, and then when they go out, they try to be a unified front. And when you go to Congress and you realize that you have members of your own conference that being a Republican is not always fundamentally the same thing, because they represent very different district, and to be able to recognize that and respect that, and understand that someone that represents a bright, deep red district may be very different from the individual who represents a Long Island seat like mine, or an Arizona seat like the one where you live in. And being able to really have conversations based on real life experiences help to build coalitions, whether it's talking about disaster aid, and very often you get the argument, well, we need to cut spending, we need to rein in our debt, we shouldn't be. And when you are able to have conversations and talk about or share stories like I just did, where you say, listen, these are communities that are not normally just living off of resources of the government. These are hardworking people that are getting crushed in a natural disaster, whether it was New York and Hurricane Sandy, whether it's LA and the fires, whether it was North Carolina in the hurricane. I mean, being able to have conversations from real life experiences and explain to your colleagues, not just in your conference, but on the other side of the aisle, what's actually happening. Like, this isn't all about a soundbite. It's not all about going to a committee hearing and getting your 5 minutes to, cut up a soundbite and, put it up on social media. These people's lives are dependent on the work that we do, and we really need to focus less on the rhetoric and more on cutting through the bureaucratic red tape so that we can deliver for the American people. And I think that many of my colleagues would agree that it's one of the things that they like from especially the rough and tumble New Yorkers on the Republican side, because we tell it how it is. We're not looking to have an hour-long meeting to share pleasantries and talk about things that really are not important. We're looking to deliver the facts and get things done. And I think that we saw that, you know, it doesn't have to do with first responders. It doesn't have to do with natural disasters, but we've seen that over the last 2 years and our work towards, you know, restoring the SALT deduction. You know, it's something that's critically important here in New York and some of the blue states that are very high taxed. And, you know, we have been able to build coalitions with Republicans that historically would have said, listen, you know, you're on your own. You know, what you guys should focus on is changing your state government and bouncing out your far progressive Democratic governor and Kathy Hochul. That's what's going to make life more affordable in New York. But when you have conversations and you share the stories and you're able to deliver the facts and cut the BS out, you really get a lot further. And I think that that's one of the, you know, one of the things that is critically important. And it also, you know, you take away the government side and go to politics. I mean, it's the reason why, you know, in 2022, my district was in Democrat hands for almost 30 years. There's 75,000 more Democrats than Republicans in my district. And that's why we were able to flip it from blue to red. And you know, obviously we entered the 2024 election and running in this district with that much more Democrats in a presidential turnout year is very difficult, but we still came within 1 point. And more importantly, we helped shift this district from a Biden 16.5 to a Harris 1. And that is momentum that we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep electing Republicans. I mean, in Nassau County, where I live, there's 1.4 million residents in the county. There are 120,000 more Democrats that live in this county. And right now, Republicans hold all 4 countywide seats. We control all 3 towns and both cities. And why? It goes back to what we talked about, you know, in the beginning of this talk, and that is Republicans are the party of common sense. Republicans are the party that are saying girls should play with girls in sports and boys should play with boys. And Democrats and independents are saying, yeah, they're right. You know, Republicans are the ones that are saying we should be unmasking people that are utilizing these masks to commit crimes. Seems pretty common sense. And that's why Democrats and independents are saying, yeah, the Republicans are right. You know, Republicans are the ones that are saying we need to secure our border at all costs and we need to start deporting, starting with criminals and those who have been arrested for crimes and send them back to their place of origin. And while Democrats are saying, well, they're trying to create havoc and fear, you know, the common sense Democrats and common sense independents are saying Republicans are right. And that's why we are winning elections, not just here in New York and on Long Island, but across the country because of that common sense approach.
How big of an issue, you know, after you decide to run, has the crime in this country and the crime committed not just by illegal aliens, but gang crime, gun crime, violent crime, you know, woke prosecutors, all that. How big of a factor was that?
I think it's a tremendous factor. I'll sort of paint the picture. So in 2021, we had an opportunity to take back Nassau County, and on the ballot that year was our election for district attorney, and we had a gentleman running who was a state senator, who was the dean of the delegation from Long Island, a Democrat, had about $3 million in the bank, but prided himself on being one of the architects of criminal justice reform and cashless bail. We ran as Republicans, again, in a county with 130,000 more Democrats. We ran a career prosecutor who never ran for office. And with the exception of the people that knew her from work and her family in her house, she was a complete unknown. And she was able to, and again, in a county with 130,000 more Democrats, she beat him on election day by 50,000 votes. Why? Because we focused that entire campaign on the progressive ideologies of New York Democrats and the fact that whether it was Andrew Cuomo, whether it's Kathy Hochul, the state legislature, they have put law-abiding citizens behind criminals. And whether it's cashless bail and criminal justice reform, whether it is, you know, clean slate, whether it's taking away the judge's ability to look back at cases and make decisions based on this person's criminal history, That all is still a top priority of voters today. I mean, that was back in 2019. I just say 2021, and then in 2022, Lee Zeldin ran for governor and had some of the best numbers that we've seen in New York State for a Republican. We took back more Republican seats in Congress than we've had in probably 35 years. And then in 2023, we kept the momentum going in Nassau County. And, you look at 2024, yeah, it was bittersweet. We lost a couple of the very, very tough races that if you look back, 5 years before, nobody thought we would have won anyway, but we came within a point. But yet we increased our state Senate delegation. We increased our state assembly delegation. We were able to, have President Trump win Nassau County. That's the first time a Republican's won Nassau County in a presidential race since Ronald Reagan. So he helped turn Long Island red. So the crime is a huge issue. And what is most mind-boggling, especially here in New York, is that you have Kathy Hochul, who I would argue is probably the most inept, most disconnected elected official in this nation, who, even when she's told that criminal justice reform and cashless bail needs to change, and it's not just said to her, but her colleagues in the Democratic Party are losing their seats. They are losing. I mean, we're now, Republicans are winning city council seats in places like the Bronx. President Trump came and rallied in the Bronx. Why? Because we are turning, Hispanics and minorities are realizing that Republicans are that party of law and order. We are the party of common sense. And instead of saying, all right, we need to make a change here, New York Democrats continue to double down and say, no, this is exactly where we belong. This is where we stand. I mean, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan is like the gift that keeps on giving for Republicans here in New York State, whether it was his weaponization of his office to go after President Trump, what he did to Danny Penny and tried to put him in jail for defending himself and others on a New York City subway. I mean, the crime that we've seen recently, whether it's by migrants or not, I mean, people getting lit on fire while they're sleeping in a New York City subway, people getting thrown in front of trains, NYPD officers in uniform getting brutally beaten in Midtown Manhattan. I mean, this is what New York has become. I remember campaigning in 2022 on a Long Island Railroad platform, and a gentleman was coming up the escalator, and you could tell he had his hard hat, strapped to his belt, and he was heading into work to knock nails. Definitely a union laborer. And as he came up the escalator, he said, "Are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And when you're campaigning on the railroad, it's always 50-50. You're afraid how to answer. But I said, I'm a Republican. He said, "Well, I'm a lifelong Democrat." He said, "I voted for Joe Biden. I voted for Barack Obama. I voted for Bill Clinton." And he said, "I will never, ever vote for a Democrat in New York State ever again." He said, "My wife is a city school teacher, and she deals with this every single day." He said, "I take the train and then the subway to my work site every day. I've gotten into physical altercations with people on the train." He said, "I'm 62 years old. I don't need this." And that's one of the things that's, on Long Island, we have so many people who travel in and out of New York City every day. So when we hear from our opposition saying, well, all you do is focus on city crime, all you do is focus on state issues. Well, the state issues has led to increased city crime. And our people, the people that we represent, are going in and out of the city every day, whether it's to, be educated, whether it's to go to some of the most world-renowned hospitals for medical care, or whether it's to go to work. My former congressional district has the biggest concentration of city cops and city firemen than any district in New York. These are people's, city school teachers. I mean, we joke around all the time, but, city school teachers, they marry city cops and city firemen, and that's the thing. They are dealing with what's happening in the city every single day. So when they're seeing people get thrown in front of trains, when they're riding subway cars where people are getting lit on fire, when they see their wife or their husband's careers being threatened by woke ideologies and by rogue DAs and quite frankly, an attorney general in New York State who has a bullseye on law enforcement and law and order. The common sense individual, the common sense voter, the people who left the 5 boroughs to come to Long Island for a better way of life, to be able to leave their doors open at night and have their kids play in the local park without having to worry about it. They are realizing if we continue to vote Democrat like we did when we were in New York City, we are never, ever, ever going to be any safer.
That is incredibly well said. And do you think that this push, because 20 years ago, cops, especially union cops, I was a union cop in the Chicago area, they voted largely Democrat. And we know that's changing. Do you think more people are going to come back to our profession?
I do. I really do. And I think that that's one of the reasons as to why, President Trump is assembling an administration that people are excited for. I think that you look at whether it's the Department of Defense in Pete Hegseth. I mean, seeing a guy like that who has fought for this country, who is a true patriot, who really is, the what we strive to be. Younger people are going to look at his path to success, his path to leadership, and say, I don't have to be a general in order to one day lead the Department of Defense. You know what? I want to put the uniform on. I want to defend this country. When you have leaders, like that are like Kash Patel, who are going to be leading the FBI, and is not someone who has spent his career in the bureaucratic red tape, but is coming into the FBI in order to give the agents the ability to do the job that they're supposed to do, instead of being led around by so-called leadership who's only using their post to fight political adversaries. I mean, you have somebody like Kristi Noem, who's going to lead Homeland Security, and her only purpose is to secure the homeland and to every single day, from the moment she wakes up to the moment she lays her head on her pillow, defend our borders and to make this country safe. I mean, it's insane that we need to be celebrating that, because quite frankly, that's what every Homeland Security secretary should have been doing. But you had somebody like Alejandro Mayorkas, who was completely disconnected from real life, who just followed the blind path of Biden and Harris, and was impeached for doing so. And quite frankly, one of the biggest failures, I mean, there's many failures of the Senate and the 118th Congress, but one of them is the fact that they didn't even take up the impeachment of Mayorkas. I mean, we've allowed 15 million people to come into this country under Joe Biden illegally, and that was all at the hands of Alejandro Mayorkas. And the fact that he completely ignored his oath, he was impeached by the House. He should have been impeached by the Senate, and he should have been taken out of office. But now we have a new day. And my point being, there are people who are going to lead these federal law enforcement agencies, whether it's a guy like Tom Homan, who came up through the ranks, was a cop, was never a huge boss in any of these big police departments, but is now leading efforts to coordinate and liaise between local, state, tribal, and federal law enforcement agencies to do the work that President Trump promised. And that is, starting with the criminals, start deporting them to make this country safe again.
I do truly believe that we are going to continue to see a trickle down from exactly what you're talking about. And I think and we're seeing it here locally in Arizona and in the Chicago suburbs, where people are saying, hey, I want to be back. I want to be a part of government. I want to be a part of keeping my community safe. And you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be an amazing, not just an amazing 4 years, but I think it's going to be an amazing decade for this country.
It's been an amazing week, and he's been in less than a week.
I know. I'm exhausted. Exhausted watching the guy. Congressman, where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook, Anthony D'Esposito, on X, at Anthony Despo, Instagram. I still have my at D'Esposito for Congress and at Anthony Despo, and also on Truth Social at Anthony Despo.
Well, I tell you what, we can't thank you enough for spending time with us today. You've been incredibly enlightening. And if you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, The brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.